Hey everyone, this is Michael Gelbart at Shift in Perspective. I'm going to share with you today a very personal story and then talk about the various dimensions and treatments for trauma healing, and trauma learning. So to begin with, the personal story I want to share with you is at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I went through what I would call the worst breakup of my life. This life, at least. And I really had a breakdown. And as a therapist, a trauma and relationship therapist, well, I would say that we are the lab. And I'm certainly the lab when it comes to breakups. I've had my share. And this particular one really was devastating. Felt very stabbed in the heart, we might say. And my knees buckled at the beginning of 2020, that marvelous year for all of us. My knees literally went out from under me, and my professional identity was challenged in ways that it hadn't been for more. And I've been before, and I've been a therapist for 4 decades now. So this time I was challenged and I would say threatened on all levels, professionally, personally, socially, and physically. I've been listening recently to a seminar on the neurobiology of trauma. So we can look at trauma on various levels, on the behavioral level, cognitive level, our belief systems, our stories, the way we think. We can look at trauma on a somatic level and work with trauma on a somatic level, which is crucial, which means regulating the nervous system, looking at survival strategies and mechanisms, the body's attempt to cope with what's experienced as a traumatic threat or survival threat. And we can look at trauma on more of a biological level and what happens in the body, including illnesses, breakdowns physically, and other forms of the body's survival mechanisms on a tissue level, we might say, or cellular level, certainly on a neurochemical level. So what I experienced was a combination of emotional pain. And as I started thinking about this story, I literally felt pain in my heart. These signals in the body are very important to pay attention to and suggest where we have and haven't cleared trauma in our systems. So often we'll tell a trauma story, whether that's a multi-generational trauma or a collective trauma. As we all know, we're living amidst existential crises that are hitting all of our buttons on the level of what we see, what we hear, what we perceive if we open up the news, or if we are subject to massive climate changes that are impacting everyone and impacting the earth in such tremendous ways. Or it's a personal trauma. These personal traumas exist in our personal lives, from in utero, perinatal experiences, birth trauma, developmental trauma, experiences developmentally that affect the brain fundamentally. The massive figures around ADHD and increase in ADHD have multiple causes. Or on a personal level, developmentally in our lives, as we evolve, various experiences that confirm our sense of threat and danger, reactivate trauma responses behaviorally and emotionally, as well as neurobiologically, and chronic trauma patterns that get stuck in the system, we might say, and clearly greatly influence our sense of wellness and happiness, well-being, So, just to come back to my own personal story, what happened when this breakup occurred was a fracturing, I would say, of my mind, my body. My social life felt very threatened. I had experiences of paranoia in relation to best friends, fearing they would side with this other person. I had let this person in very deeply to my heart and psyche and felt tremendously unsafe. On, I would say, close to a soul level, my soul was certainly experiencing something very deep, ultimately which, years later, I've tremendously learned from. As they say in Hebrew, Gam Ze L'Tova, also this is for the good. Well, it took me years, literally, and this relationship was only a year long. It wasn't actually a great relationship, but it wasn't a wise or safe relationship, turns out. But I had surrendered myself and given over to this to be fully devoted and loyal to someone that turned out wasn't the best choice. Nonetheless, what happened for me was a series of breakdowns in my body from what first of all began as an anger fight response. I was very, very hurt, very, very livid, felt very cut off, triggered all of my abandonment issues, betrayal issues. So it was a very deep sense of, I would say, even of banishment, which is one of the worst experiences that we have, and also of ghosting, which is a terribly difficult experience. I would go to sleep at night, put my head down on the pillow, no distractions. As we know, sometimes we can be visited by ghosts, I would say, and put quotation marks, air quotes on that. So, nonetheless, what happened was my right knee literally went out and buckled underneath me. I had to use a cane first time in my life. My knees have been pretty healthy. They're not quite shortstop knees anymore. But as a 64-year-old man, pretty healthy. I dance often, frequently. That's my therapy, by the way. I recommend movement as a primary stress management mechanism. Get our breathing going, as you can hear on this walk. Taking a walk with you. And so my right knee buckled under, and my left elbow and shoulder, I went into a tennis elbow phase, and my whole left side was just racked with pain and immobilization. And immobilization is a stress response, that freezing that occurs in various places, especially the neck and the shoulders, obviously the trapezoids, and also in the hips and pelvis region where we freeze in terms of flight fight. I was in full-on fight and fear response. So right knee, left tennis elbow, which is really the whole mechanism of from the wrist to the whole realm of the shoulders and the neck, left side, which I would say also, sidebar, is, I think of that as the feminine side. My right side is more of the warrior moving forward, and the left side is more of receptive, absorbent, taking in. I would think of the word helpless here, but there's more like a yielding or a submission aspect. And when we don't have a choice about submission, that's where our nervous system can really shut down. Shame and guilt and depression and all the tendencies for the parasympathetic nervous system to take us to the bottom floor, to shut down its operations. So my right knee started to heal. And as my right knee healed, my left knee whacked out. And as my left shoulder healed, my right elbow went out. So it was this crossing over from one, and X marks the system, where pain kept moving. And as you know, pain conditions can shift around. It's almost like the pain is looking for the most vulnerable places in the body, finds those places, and goes into battle. So the fight mode was turned inwards. And as we know, anger can often be internalized when there aren't outlets, and it's a whole nother subject that I'll get to in another video. So it took a process. Of course, then 2020 was 2020. So that's how I went into 2020. Also being in a men's circle on the men's team where compassion and accountability were met with a kind of fierce, don't be a victim approach, and increased all the stress that was going on in my body rather than my body receiving what it needed. Of course, we're all in isolation at that point. We're all in trauma mode in terms of the pandemic, in terms of the racial protests and conflicts that were occurring literally in my office's neighborhood. And the fires that were occurring, which to me was really the most stressful component amongst multiple stressful components. So what has happened over time is that I've healed a lot, and healing the somatic body system involves more than the arthritis in my body, which again I do have in my knees, turns out, and in my left neck, and certainly contribute as factors, and also once again is an inflammatory response from the body to sort of the fire. I mean, I'm a very Aries person, and we're in the new moon of Leo, as astrologers might call this stretch, in the age of Aquarius. So I'm basically a hopeful and optimistic person. But that was a real plunge to the depths, and opened me up to untold, well, I've told it, but a great amount of insights is what I would say, psychically, intuitively, emotionally. I've learned so much. And again, being the lab means our bodies go through what our bodies go through. Just because I'm a breakup specialist, couples counselor, doesn't mean I don't have those limitations and flaws and capacities and gifts. It means that I'm both the breakup specialist and the breakupee, or sometimes the breakupper. You know, we go through all kinds of conflicts, whether it's romantic, familial, housemates, work associates. It's just part of our nature as humans, human animals, to have opposable thumbs and go through shit. So the composting of that was fundamentally valuable and has taken its course, and trauma learning is really crucial. So what I'm offering really is a perspective on how these attacks, as the body experiences and perceives them, generate chemistry and neurowiring activations in the sympathetic activation system that are adapted to on a biological, emotional, somatic, and behavioral level with strategies that we're looking at as flight, fight, freeze, fawn, fuck. It's an arousal mechanism, thank you, an activation and survival mechanism. Frenzy, I have what I call Uncle Frantic is one of my parts. I do parts work that's super helpful with unblending these different strategies and aspects of ourselves. So I think I'll complete the story there, say that I'm in a healthy, secure relationship now, which is fundamentally what we're working towards is co-regulation. We all have our self-regulation mechanisms, and those are helpful, from getting up and having a drink of water, or doing 20 push-ups, or taking a walk in the neighborhood, or creative writing, breathing practices. All these are wonderful strategies that we can learn to heal our trauma basis. where the autonomic nervous system hits us into deep survival mechanisms that are not in our conscious control. And so that's where awareness practices come in, and all these various strategies for cognitive safety, emotional regulation. So that's what I'll share with you for now. And thanks so much for listening. If you've made it this far, Michael Gelbart, Shift in Perspective. Wow, attention spans. We have to be really compelling to draw the attention of our very busy and very crowded, very active, and our curious minds. So I'm wishing you well. Hope this has been helpful. Please comment. Please go on my YouTube channel to join the YouTube channel. You can sign up for my newsletter at intimacyperspectives.com. Michael Gelbart, wishing you a healthy day and lots of learning.